Good morning, everybody. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to Frenshe Book Club with the book Attacking Anxiety and Depression. I am going to have my therapist actually join, so I'm super excited. She's awesome. Let me just get her. Hi. Hi. You just like popped up so fast.
I know. Hi, it's so good to see you.
I am so excited to have you.
I know.
Let me just turn you up. Hold on. So this is like a really important session this week for me.
Yeah.
I feel like it's like in this book, it's like the changing, and you and I talk about this stuff all the time. But it's about the self-talk and how that can really obviously make you more depressed or stressed.
I feel better, yeah.
And feel better. So I wanted to like obviously talk about some of the things that I really loved about the session, and then you and I can obviously jump in. But I'm so excited to have your expertise.
I'm so glad to be here. I know. Feels like we're in school, but
I know, right?
I have my notes, my tea. Let's do this.
For real. Okay, so self-talk. It says objectives. Understand that our negative thoughts create our anxiety, fear, and often lead to depression. Understand negative thinking is a bad habit and addiction. Understand that every thought carries its own chemistry. We feel what we think. That I totally believe in. It says understand that the brain does not know the difference between an imagined scenario and a real happening. It responds as if the imagined is real. So obviously, like on the session, they talked about like how a normal, like regular person probably thinks negatively like 370 negative thoughts a day. And then people who struggle with mental health is like obviously way more than that. And I guess like I didn't really believe it until, during the session, it tells you to monitor your negative thoughts, and things that I just didn't think were very negative are kind of negative. So I was like, oh, that's a negative thought, like that feel good.
Yeah.
And that's been really helpful because I didn't realize how my thoughts were contributing to some like a little bit more of a victim kind of aspect, which makes it like I felt like when I started to regain like, I am strong, I am healthy, I am like, powerful in that way. Like, I feel like I started to kind of turn, oh yeah, like actually that's positive. And those help us like get out of how we feel like we're victim to like what we're going through in anything.
Absolutely.
I felt like this is I don't know, I just feel like this one was a turning point when I did this a couple years ago. And I think that it just like, I've always been someone who monitors my thoughts because that's kind of like what you always say, like, okay, well, what were you thinking right before you started feeling anxious? That's always the question. And so for years since I've done this book, I've always been like, okay, if I'm feeling anxious, what was I just thinking about? Normally, like, tell me, oh, okay, yeah, that thought was like not really the best positive thought to be thinking. It's not a real thought. It's, so I was just like, I think that has been something that has definitely helped me.
You've gotten so good at that, Ashley. You've gotten so good at that, bringing it to the front of your awareness.
Yes. Yeah. I'm so aware of those thoughts. And the most of the time when I'm feeling anxious is when I am just like by myself in the car and I have a lot of time to think.
It's always in the car for you. It's always in the car. Everything happens in the car. I know.
Like, okay, I'm driving, and so now I'm gonna let my mind wander and do like some crazy thinking and make me feel bad.
Yeah.
It's so wild. But yeah, so this one is definitely a turning point. I love that it's like negative dialogue is one of the most important aspects of chronic anxiety and depression. One of the reasons you stay in this condition is because of the way you talk to yourself. You must learn to have compassion for yourself. That is really big too. I think that for me, learning to kind of be my best friend through anything that I'm going through was really helpful as well. I remember reading a book that said something like, you should talk to yourself like you would to a best friend going through something really hard. Like if you're feeling like, oh my gosh, I just like did a horrible meeting, or I just failed at something, or this is just like, you would never tell your best friend like, yeah, you could have done better.
You blew it.
You know, like
you ruined everything.
Yeah, like you are not great at what you do. Like you would never would be like compassionate, be like, oh my gosh, this is like, you did the best that you could, and like that's all that matters. And like you would have such compassion for your friend. And it's like, why don't we talk to ourselves that way? Like why do we just feel like we have to be, I don't know, I've just definitely been hard on myself for a long time. And I learned over the last couple of years on how to be more compassionate to myself and not so hard. And I think that it's important to do that because it really does affect how you feel with your anxiety and depression based off of your thoughts and how we treat ourselves. So I feel like if you always lead with self-love, then, you know, you can really help your mental health with everything.
Absolutely. And your nervous system, you can hear the softening when you shift from coming at yourself with that much criticism and pressure. Of course, that's activating to the nervous system. Of course, that directly contributes to anxiety versus shifting into something so much softer and relating with that compassion.
Yeah. You always have helped me too with the nervous system of calming it down, and like knowing that my anxiety brain is on when it's triggered or when it's like not as triggered. Obviously I feel more calm, but when it's triggered, like you say like, you usually scan the world as if there's like a threat everywhere. So interesting because it's really, what has helped me out of that is acknowledging that my anxiety brain is on. So I'm going to feel more anxious, but then also like self, talk and like calming myself down and being like, everything is good. You're okay. Like we are fine in this moment. Like I think it's just like I'm in the car, but I am completely, just like calming myself down and thinking more positive thoughts has helped me throughout, obviously, just like trying to not get into an anxiety attack.
Yeah. I love that you're bringing that up. If you're in anxiety brain, I think what you're speaking to is your lens through which you're seeing everything as a lens of threat. So you can't process your day from a calm place when your fear brain is on, because your fear brain is designed to elevate your anxiety. So the first step is being able to shift away from that activation mode.
Yeah, that was like so helpful. What else in here? Obviously it tells you the difference between negative thinking and positive thinking, but I know those things. And it talks about like, obviously, so depression and sometimes the way we think when we're in depression, the all or nothing thinking. In this type of thinking, there's no middle ground. If we have made a mistake or have a bad day, we feel we are a total failure or never do anything right. This type of thinking is usually unrealistic since things are rarely 100% one way or the other. That's a good one to know, because that's like, I think like when you're being really hard on yourself and you feel like you've done something wrong, and it's like, that all or nothing is just never helpful. Negative predictions or jumping to conclusions. I definitely, especially becoming a mom, I don't try to think negative, but I'm like always trying to be one step ahead. And I'm like, okay, well, she's over there. Is this going to happen? Is that going to, it's like, oh my God, like
next level.
You're just trying to, I feel like maybe sometimes our brain tries to predict in a negative way to like comfort us in case.
Oh, yeah, it's protective. Absolutely.
And that, yeah. So I've had to kind of like watch those kind of thoughts to make sure like, okay, she's fine.
Yes. I recommend to people watching or people reading along with you, whether or not they are tracking the book or not, those categories of thought are called cognitive distortions. And you can do a really quick Google search, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT plus cognitive distortions, and you'll get 10 or 15 really helpful thought patterns like all or nothing thinking, overgeneralization, predicting, that are so helpful to track. And I think anyone can start with that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's like, it's knowing those things that it's just obviously like knowledge is power. So it wasn't until I learned about all of those different thinking and, you know, just all of these different symptoms of that I started to realize like, oh, okay, this is not just me. Like a lot of people suffer from this. And this isn't like something's going on inside my body that I'm scared of. Like this is actually like a thing that is happening, and it's called anxiety. And this is actually like thought patterns that I can like realize and stop myself from going too far. And so, yeah, I really do. I think that that's such a good thing to do, is just finding out what those thought patterns are. So then you know when you're doing them, and then you can easily stop yourself from doing them, and have it spiral into something else. One of mind reading is another one they say on here.
Yes.
With our negative distortions, we often assume that others are reacting negatively towards us. Our inner dialogue leads us to believe that people are looking down on us or angry without checking what may really be going on. That is like part of the 4 agreements, is to not assume. And I definitely have read the 4 agreements and really love that book. And so I think that is a really big one. We tend to assume that we like, you know, someone's acting a certain way towards us because of something we've done, or we usually put ourselves in like, you know, like, oh, it's because of us. And it's like, sometimes they're not even like thinking
aware of what we were doing. Right. And we always assume when we are assuming, we never assume something positive without practice. Like our default is to assume that number 1, it's about us, and number 2, that it's a negative reflection about us.
Yes. Yeah. So it's so important not to assume. Just don't even there. It's like, it's hard not to, but it's just like, just don't go there, because like we can't people's minds. We're not those people. Like everyone thinks differently. Everyone comes to, you know, obviously just everyone's on a different plane. So it's like, don't think you know what's going on, and especially don't, you know, think it's because of you. Right. There's the shoulds, the should and shouldn't. This type of the thinking indicates things have to be a certain way. I definitely have gotten stuck in the, like, I should have done that.
It can be endless.
I know. And then it makes my anxiety, like, it's like my social interactions sometimes, I'll like be texting and I'll be like, oh, I shouldn't have said that. Because I'm very honest person. And so I'm like too honest. And like, I'm like, oh my God, I shouldn't have said that. And then it's just like my anxiety speaks. I'm like, maybe I should say like, I'm sorry and I shouldn't have said that. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm like spiraling about like how I said, and the person's like, I don't care. Like,
I'm fine. Right. But if you imagine like externalizing that voice that you should, if I followed you around all day and every time you made a decision, I'm like, oh, you probably shouldn't have done that. You should have done that differently. You would immediately look at me like, hey, dude, stop doing that. You're freaking me out. But when we do it to ourselves, we're unaware of how frequently we're activating our system. That's why the awareness is so important, like you're saying.
You know, like to criticize yourself that much, or to be so hard on yourself in that way where you're like almost like walking on eggshells with yourself. Like that's, first of all, I definitely have been in a relationship in the past with an ex-boyfriend who was like very critical over like the tiniest. I would pick up the phone and say hi, and he'd be like, why do you say hi like that? You know, I'm calling. And I'm like it was like very specific things. And I like, that doesn't make you feel good. And so it's like ourselves where we're like, oh, I said that. I should have, you know, like, yes, there's some things that we might say like, and we don't mean it the way, or the intention gets skewed, but it's like, don't be so hard on yourself. Like, it's okay to make mistakes, you know? I think that's very important, which leads us to fear of failure. Fear of failure. I don't know if it really
bring it. Yeah.
So, you know, that one 6 years ago was a big one for me. I realized that because of my anxiety, and depression at the time, I hadn't like gone into a recording studio for a really long time because of how I felt. I had my last like guilty pleasure album. Like, I just felt like I never, the most important thing is I never grade my success on outward, like just like how it does in the world. Like, I always graded on like how I felt about it, what the process was. Like, that to me is like, it's either successful or like you know, like, ugh, missed a mark. And I think that in that last album, there was just a lot going on between me and my record label, and it just was not the best process. I was proud of it, but I was like, oh, I wish it, like, there was just so many things about it that just like made me turn off about the music business. And so I basically, yeah, I just hadn't gone into a recording studio since. And I was doing this book and I was like, oh my gosh, like I just couldn't really find that inspiration. And then suddenly doing this book, I was able to get back into the studio. I wrote, you know, co-wrote Symptoms, all of anxiety and depression. And I was like so proud of that whole process. And so it's really interesting that when we look at ourselves and fear of failure, how some of that can, like, our anxiety and depression can get in the way of doing really awesome things, really beautiful things. And I know this last week I've been doing like really exciting stuff, and I was having the anxiety like kind of creep in. And I just say to myself, don't let anxiety rob you of this moment.
I love that.
I think that's important. Like, when you do something for so long and then anxiety's like, hey, I'm here to party with you. And it's like,
missed you.
To me, you unfortunately like get out of the present moment because you're so affected by the anxiety. And so I was just like, you know what? Don't let it rob you of this moment. And I think that really calmed me. But let's talk about fear of failure, because it is something that everyone goes through. Everyone life, and that's like a normal human thing. Fear of failure is fear of rejection. It results in decisions designed to prevent the possibility of failure and rejection. Decisions that result in jobs never taken, relationships never started, opportunities left unchallenged. A person with a healthy self-esteem who has managed to find success in life has experienced many failures along the way. The key is to fail successfully, to understand that failing is a big one, that falling short possibility, and to recognize that it is part of the life process. I know so many people who are wildly successful that have failed at some point in their life.
Oh yeah, they've gotten better at it each time.
Yes. And I have definitely had failures in my life, and if anything, I have like learned from them and grown from them, and like have a better experience the next time I do something like that. 'Cause I'm like, oh, that was a big learning lesson. At the time, obviously it like hurts so much, and you're like, oh my God, this is the end of the world in some way. But you have to have a perspective in a way that's like, this is painful. This is not where I wanted this to go or end up, but it's okay.
It's okay.
It's okay.
Yeah. You can't grow by avoiding failure. The growth is not about avoiding failure. It's about changing your relationship to failure when inevitably you encounter it. And you can get better at failure and expose yourself to it the same way that you can get better at anything that you want to practice. So just like you're saying, the most successful people, they've failed so many times because they have purposely allowed themselves to fail that many times and just shift their relationship to it to allow for that growth.
Yeah. I know. It's it's obviously like the hardest thing, but I think it's important because I feel every lesson leads you to exactly like where you are meant to go and want to go. You can't just think that that's the end. You have to push through it and know. But that's a heavy one for sure. I think that, you know, this week with the self-talk has helped me tremendously. Just in kind of how I was feeling a couple weeks ago. I also wanted to bring up, you know, there's one of the things I wanted to ask you specifically is like, there's a lot of heaviness in the world. Obviously, there's a lot of things going on in the world. And so it's like someone who struggles with mental health, like how do we kind of go through this? How, because I'm someone who can sometimes take on a lot and then it makes me really upset and depressed. And so it's like, what are your, I don't know, like what can you say that can help anybody do that?
It's such a good question because you want to avoid, I think, knowing you and the way that you connect to people, you want to avoid completely shutting out the bad things that are happening in the world, because then you're not able to offer any empathy and you're not able to help. You're not able to stay in the loop enough to be able to help and be aware. So I don't think the answer is never turn on the news, never read through an article, just completely shut yourself off, because then we're not growing, because we're not expanding our perspective. So what I ask people to do is just work on balancing how frequently they're tuning in versus checking out. When you're tuning in, learn, grow, become more aware of situations, ask how you can help, ask what you need to learn, and then allow yourself to check out, meaning remove yourself from the exposure of information, do something that's calming to you, and feel okay about that, because people really struggle here with guilt. I'm not doing enough. I'm so privileged, and it's good to recognize that. I'm allowed to shift in and out of this suffering because of the situation that I'm in. We don't want to go down that guilt spiral, because you need to use that checking out period to get your strength back enough to be able to tune back in. So the balance is really important.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's true. The balance. Yeah, because it's like, I think that, yeah, I feel like that's kind of like always what I've talked with you about, is like having that balance and knowing when to, you know, kind of, it's just how you feel. I feel like it's important to not, not, I think for me, it's about being proactive, like how versus dwelling in the feeling of everything. So I think that's super important. That's also like something that this book also teaches you, is doing things for others and how that makes you feel. And so I feel like if there's anything in your life and in the world that's making you feel a certain way, try doing something for someone else. Try helping. And that will help you feel better than feeling like you're not doing anything or something. So I really do think that that has been also like something super important. I also just want to, you know, kind of talk to you about things that have helped me. Specifically, my favorite things about you, Christy, is that you give me homework and tools to help my anxiety. And something that I feel like we should share, because it's been so helpful, is, as obviously you guys know, I have dealt with my anxiety of, you know, for me, it's like I can get anxious on a plane. I can get anxious in a meeting. I can get anxious.
It's like a Dr. Seuss book. I'm loving this.
But one of the things that has been so helpful is that when I would be in table reads, like going over scripts, I was like, oh my gosh, I'd get that anxiety feeling and I didn't know what to do with it. And I was just scared, and I'd be like, oh my gosh, like what if I like have to leave this room and we're in the middle of this table read with like producers, and the next had a lot of pressure on me. And something you showed me, which was so easy to do because no one even doing it, is the circle.
Yes.
Will you explain that
I love this. Yes. So this is really simple, but I find it effective, particularly with practice. So I had asked you to find something discreet that you can do with your body that brings your awareness to a neutral, controlled sensation. So for you, particularly because it was the table read thing, yes, I remember this. We had chosen keep your hands in your lap and simply draw small circles with your thumb on your palm so that you can bring your awareness to a neutral, controlled sensation. And what I had asked you to do was, prior to the table read, start developing a practice of drawing these small circles while offering yourself something that is soothing to you cognitively. For example, letting yourself know, I'm safe, I'm in control, my body is calm, so that you could develop a cognitive and a physical connection to that movement. So by the time you were in the exposure of the table read, all you needed to do was move your thumb to your palm, and those cognitive messages would already be associated, those soothing messages. I am calm, I am safe. And you can choose anything. I have clients who just squeeze their fist. No one notices if you just are squeezing your fist and then releasing it. Yeah. So something that's discreet and allows you to feel like you're harnessing control back.
And there's that self-talk, that like positive self-talk, that it's like, I am safe, because it's about breaking the, like just those thoughts in the brain of where you were and breaking that pattern, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Because when our fear brain kicks on, it's really easy to disconnect from our body. And that's when we start spiraling or ruminating, or we have those cognitive distortions pop up. So step one to getting out of the fear brain is reconnecting with the body in the present moment.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that has been so helpful. Even when I would have anxiety in the car, I've done that. And it's like, oh my God, like it's just so comforting. And I'm like, great. But yeah, noticed whenever I would do that, if I felt anxiety, completely calmed me down. So that's been so helpful. What other things do you have for us?
I wanted to go back to the point that you were making around our brain can't tell the difference between an imagined experience and a real experience. That is scientifically backed up. Like our brain cannot distinguish between future-oriented thinking and present time and past-oriented thinking and present time, which is why we can have an anxiety attack when we think about something bad happening in the future. And we can have an anxiety attack when we think about something terrible that happened in the past. Our body doesn't know that we haven't actually been transported there.
Yeah. I remember actually too, like a couple years ago, it's gone by so fast, but a couple years I was taking a flight and I was like pretty anxious about it. And I remember you saying, do this meditation where I like get on the flight.
Yeah.
Like I had like this whole meditation where I would walk myself through like going to the airport, getting on the flight, feeling a certain way, it, kind of going, obviously like perfectly fine, no anxiety attack. And it was so helpful because it's like almost like you experienced it already. And I used that with going to the hospital for my labor. Like that same type of thing where I was like, okay, envision like how you're gonna go to the hospital, you're gonna check in, you're gonna get ready because you're gonna have a baby. And I did that before, and that was so helpful because obviously I talked to you as well. I was like, what if my anxiety ticks up? Because obviously you just don't know what's going to happen. And if something, like is out of your control and you have, like my whole fear was like, what if they're like, something's gone wrong?
Yeah.
And so you kind of walked me through scenarios of like, okay, well, let's not go there. Let's, and to be honest, and you told me there was there's a safe word. I think I remember you telling me like telling Chris, my husband, to tell me a word that would know to calm me down. Like all of those, so helpful. I also think like sharing that you have anxiety with people around you is also really helpful because I think a lot of it is like you feel embarrassed if you get anxiety. I know that when I've done meetings before I go in, I'm like, oh yeah, so like sometimes have anxiety about these meetings. And that kind of takes a lot of pressure off too.
Yes, I love that you do that. Every time I'm giving a presentation or doing a training, yeah, nearly every time, the first thing I tell the audience, no matter who it is, a group of academics, a group of other therapists, a group of doctors, I will share, hey, I'm going to be kind of panicking for the next 60 seconds. So I'm going to stand here and allow my body to calm down because I know that that's going to be really helpful to me. And
Yeah.
I just give myself that minute, and I voice, and putting it out there diffuses the tension. And sometimes like a few of them will laugh or like, be supportive of me.
Yeah, it definitely diffuses just like everything, because I feel like when you don't share, you're kind of like almost like going through it by yourself. And you're like, oh God,
Yeah.
what happens? What if this happens? And then like
Mm-hmm.
self, like it's okay to feel this way. Like it is
Right.
okay to feel like anxious if you're in a car sometimes. It's okay to feel like allow your
Mm-hmm.
know that it's okay to feel that way.
Right.
And I think it's so important to share, because then it just takes out just like a lot of air in that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's important. Like I think it's okay to, like, everyone feels anxious at, you know, presentations or meetings or sometimes in a car. Like it's just totally normal. So it's like a lot,
Mm-hmm.
that's okay. Um,
Absolutely.
oh my gosh, I can't believe that you're feeling anxious in this moment, you know, like,
Right.
yeah,
Right. Right. And
don't,
you're humanizing it.
don't listen to
Right.
uh,
Yeah. Avoiding it and making it seem like it's unspeakable is no doubt going to increase the tension in your body.
yeah. And I also know too, like some of the best things too that has helped me, which is self-talk as well. And you're like that best friend where you just tell me and it calms me down. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I first got our dog Sushi, and she had like an accident. I had to take her to the doctor, like, or the urgent care. And I was freaking out because it triggered just everything I went through with Maui. And I remember reaching
Yeah.
out to you on text and being like, oh my gosh, I'm back at urgent care. And like, I can't stop my mind from thinking the worst. Like that's something.
Mm-hmm.
And you just said, remember, you've gotten through this before and you've gotten through it and you're going to be okay. You have
Mm-hmm.
through one of the worst things and you
Yeah.
were okay. And I
Yeah.
think that's important to remind ourselves, like when we're going through a really difficult time or scary time or something that, you know, really scares us, is that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, we are strong. We're very strong people. And this book tells us, like, if you have anxiety and depression, like you're a really strong person, because
Mm-hmm.
we deal with a lot more
Yep.
just mentally. And
Yep.
so it's remembering that like you are strong and you can get through anything, that those comforting words, like obviously the scared part about me is like just wants to have all those negative thoughts of like,
Mm-hmm.
what if this happens? What if this? What if, you know, all these what ifs? And it's like calming ourselves in that moment, you know?
Yeah.
And being in that moment, you also taught me to, like, even with Maui, on, okay, like, just be in this moment. Be in the moment that you're in right now. Okay, I'm just taking her to the doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Take Sushi to urgent care. You know, like
Mm-hmm.
very like grounding moments
Yeah.
of, instead of just like having your, you know, thought process go
Right.
south.
Yeah.
That's
Yep.
really important.
Yeah. Anxiety can't exist in the present. It only exists in the future, something you're worried about happening, or in the past, something you wish hadn't happened, something you are angry about happening. It can't exist if you are in the present moment, taking things as they come and calming yourself down as they happen. And your examples speak to that. You were going through something that was really explicitly quite stressful, and something being explicitly stressful doesn't mean that your nervous system needs to be activated in a way that causes distress and suffering. If you can stay present even through stressful moments, you can achieve calm.
Yeah, yeah, that has been so helpful. Um, Also, I mean, I feel like the Frenshe community knows you, but if they don't, this is my therapist,
Hi.
Christy. She's amazing because she has taught, what I went to her for originally was because I had like a sensation in my neck that was happening for a long time, a couple years ago. So I went to Christy because she teaches how pain can manifest in our bodies from anxiety and depression. So if you're feeling like there's a chronic pain in your body somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
most likely it's being caused by our brains and because
Mm-hmm.
we are being anxious. And recently I had a lot of like these sensation in my calves and my leg.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I was just like, oh my gosh, like something's wrong. Of course, your brain wants to go like something's wrong with my legs. And I would do this meditation with Christy, and like it would go away. So
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
like, well,
You're so receptive to that. Yeah. Yeah. It's so crazy actually to think back if that's what you originally reached out to me about. But not just because it's been so long and I feel so close to you and gotten to know you through so many different ups and downs. And it's just been amazing to, for me personally, of course, to develop a close relationship to you. But the way that you bring your personal into a public forum, the same way that helps verbalize anxiety for you, like when you verbalize anxiety, it calms you down. It absolutely is having a positive ripple effect for everyone else who's ever felt that way. And I'm just so appreciative that you make these conversations feel normal because anxiety is normal. It's a normal evolutionary response that all of us can have.
mhm. Yeah. No, I feel like it's something that I just want to help people, you know? And on
Mm-hmm.
like there was this morning I'm like, oh, should I do this live? Like, you know, there's just so much going on in the world right now. But I was just like, I feel like
Mm-hmm.
people might be dealing with anxiety and depression as well.
Right.
And I feel like
Right.
I just like to create this like safe place where we can openly discuss this because I have lost so many, you know, like I've lost a couple people to this disease. Like I, you know, just don't I don't think that's the answer. I think
Mm-hmm.
that we just need to openly speak about these things and kind of take this like whole stigma out of what depression, you know, that scary word depression is. And if we can be more open and help each other heal, I just feel like that would just help so many people going through it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I felt very alone going through what I was going through. And I think that I guess in my work with like what I love to do, which is comedy and making people laugh, I think that I always like to be there for people when they are going through a tough times because I know when I'm going through a tough time, I want to put on a comedy like Friends and
Mm-hmm.
better. I always wanted to be that person for
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
And so I think this is just an extension of that where it's like, okay, I'm trying to make you laugh in this. I'm just trying to open this conversation and just make you feel not so alone in what you're going through. Because we all go through this one way, and sometimes, you know, like a couple times in our life,
Mm-hmm.
I know everybody has dealt with anxiety and depression. They may not deal with it on a scale that others are dealing with it on, but we all go through it.
We all do. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think once you realize that, it's like makes you feel better, you know?
Oh yeah, so connecting. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. We can't exist as a human and not have dips of anxiety and depression. It's just our mind body connection, and it's true for everyone. And it's more helpful to air it out and share tools and share experiences because that is so connecting and so calming.
yeah. And also, it's like there's a lot that's gone on in the last couple years for like, I mean,
Oh,
I dealt with this 6 years ago, but like obviously everything we've just been through and we're still going through, like there's a lot of why we would feel this way. If someone
mm-hmm.
this way, I would be like, okay, are they not in touch with like what's going on? Like, so
Yeah.
I think that it's a completely normal thing. And I think that just having these tools like help you. And one of the biggest tools is just being open. I think being open,
Mm-hmm.
talking to somebody about it,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it helps. It really helps when you are able. I feel like the ones, you know, when they're, I had a friend who didn't speak about it. I had never even knew that they suffered from depression. You know, and it's like that is when it's really scary because like they just don't talk about it and they just feel so alone. And so
Mm-hmm.
the more you can talk to a friend, a family member, a therapist, like it's just so helpful and so needed when you're going through something like this.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. Thank you for being willing to say that.
Yeah, yeah, of course. I mean, I am so grateful for you, Christy, throughout
You're the best.
You are literally the best. And yeah, I mean, I feel like I have gone to like a couple therapists, but like you giving me those tools, no one, like a lot of people don't do that. Like sometimes people want to listen to you and like hear you talk, and then they're like, okay, next session. Well, just happened. Like,
See you soon.
I'm like, can you help me with what I just said? Like, definitely like, you know, like talks about the whole thing. But I really do feel like you're just like so helpful in any way. Like, how can we find you, or how can someone find you?
Hi, my name is Christy Leakey.
But like, we're
here I am. My center is called the Better Mind Center. So that's, yeah, I have a team of therapists all trained in a similar approach. And I agree with you completely. So some people get a lot out of just sharing their feelings and the experience of being held in a room, but anxiety and depression are workable diagnoses for many people. And a lot of people are craving a little bit of structure and some education and techniques that they can take from session to session. So yeah, the Better Mind Center, all of my therapists operate from the same approach.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you for doing this today.
Yeah, thank you for letting me
so
come
helpful.
in. It's always so good to see you.
Helped like a lot of people and sharing the hand, you guys, it's so good. I would really recommend trying that whenever you feel anxious. But you're the best.
You're the best. I'll see you soon. Thank you so much.
So much for tuning in. Yes, someone said the Better Mind Center. Yes, the Better Mind Center. Thanks for tuning in today. I know there's a lot going on, but hopefully this has helped. Any of you guys will obviously be doing this next Saturday as well and going over my next session. But I love you guys, and I hope you have a beautiful Saturday.